The Nikon D60 was released back in 2008. Now, at the time, this cost around $750. Nowadays, you can find it used for about $30. That's how much I paid for this one right here. So just what do you get with this 14-year-old camera? Well, there's a 10.2 megapixel CCD sensor, 3-area autofocus system, and a 2.5-inch 230K dot LCD screen. Build quality of the D60 is a combination of metal and plastic. You know, it's not as robust as something more professional like the Nikon D200. You've got to remember, this was more of an entry-level camera, but having said that, it's a solid, well-built camera. Now, in terms of ergonomics, it's actually a really small camera. I mean, it's still big by modern standards. It's not pocketable in any way, shape, or form, but compared to other DSLRs, this is actually pretty tiny. You know, it's almost on par with something like a Canon SL1. It's a pretty tiny camera and it's super compact. You know, it's one of those cameras where your little finger actually will hang off the bottom of the grip. You know, there's not enough room for your entire hand, but having said that, it's still really comfortable to hold. Shutter speed on the D60 goes up to 1/4000th of a second. Would be nice to see 1/8000th of a second, but you know, this was an entry-level camera. So if you're shooting on the D60 in bright conditions at f1.4 or at f1.2, that is something worth considering. In terms of flash sync speed, it goes up to 1/200th of a second. And in terms of burst rate, you've got 3 frames per second, pretty much unlimited in JPEG, or at least up until around 100 frames based on some of the testings I've seen online. In terms of RAW, you've got 3 frames per second, basically for about 6 frames. Now, in terms of autofocus on the D60, you've got a 3-area phase detect autofocusing system. It's pretty rudimentary in that sense. When you're looking through the viewfinder, it's literally just 1, 2, 3 dots, and that's what you're choosing from. You know, you can choose which focusing point that you want, and there's a few different variations in the menu of how you can set the autofocus to behave, but basically, I've noticed that in real-world practice, it kind of picks the center frame pretty much all the time. You know, if you're used to shooting older film cameras, this probably is nothing new to you. But if you're coming from a modern camera with like 8 million different autofocusing points, this might come as a bit of a surprise for you. Having said that, in practice, it really does seem to work okay. You know, you're not gonna just lock on a person's eye or face if you're shooting portraits, but for kind of casual everyday use, you know, it hasn't really been a hassle. It actually works pretty well. The menu system on the D60 is just the pretty standard classic Nikon menu system. If you're a Nikon shooter, all of this is very familiar to you, and if you're coming from another camera company, still, everything's pretty much easy to find. It's really well laid out. Haven't had any trouble finding any of the settings. Everything's just kind of right there where you just assume it might be. Now, in terms of image quality, you've got that 10 megapixel CCD sensor, and it looks absolutely amazing. You know, some of my favorite sensors were all from this era of Nikon cameras. You know, you've got things like this camera, the Nikon D40, D40X, D50, and D200, all sharing either the same or similar 10 megapixel sensor. And hang on, because I worded that weirdly. The Nikon D50 and D40 are both 6 megapixel cameras. The D40X, D60, and D200 are all 10 megapixel cameras. And all of these cameras have CCD sensors. So the image quality coming from all of these cameras, whether 6 megapixels or 10 megapixels, is actually pretty similar. I can attest as someone who owns the majority of these cameras. There's not a whole lot of difference between that 6 megapixel sensor and that 10 megapixel sensor in terms of like a resolution, but you are getting that same kind of filmic quality out of both. Like, in all honesty, if I was to rank all these cameras in order of my favorite, I'd put the D200 at the top and the Nikon D50, a 6 megapixel camera, in second place. Everything else basically comes tied for third for me. Anyway, just wanted to clear that up. Now back to the video. Having said that, yeah, I mean, it looks absolutely amazing. You know, in modern times when people are so obsessed with trying to recreate that film look, D60 is one of those cameras that does it pretty well just straight out of camera. So is the Nikon D60 worth it in 2022? And for me, it's 100,000,000% yes. This is a no-brainer. You've got pretty solid build quality. You've got a really compact design. You've got that 10 megapixel CCD sensor, and the autofocus, even though it's only 3 points, actually works pretty well, especially just for everyday use. And all of this comes in at a price under $50. That's absolutely insane. It's definitely a yes, but I will say it's a yes with a bit of an asterisk. I got my Nikon D200 for $60, and so for me personally, since the price is so cheap, I think I would still buy a Nikon D200 over this, just because with the Nikon D200, you're getting a really professional magnesium alloy body with amazing ergonomics and a lot of like external buttons and controls that you're not going to find on the D60. You know, I think that would be my advice for anyone in the market for one of these. The Nikon D40, D40X, D50, D60, and D200 are all going to give you pretty similar image quality since they're all kind of sharing that same 10 megapixel CCD sensor. If price is your biggest thing, well then whichever one of those is cheapest, just go ahead and buy it. If you don't mind spending a few extra bucks though, I personally would just go for the D200 because you're getting a very professional camera with that super sturdy magnesium alloy build quality, tons of like external buttons and dials and controls that you don't have on the D40, D60, etc. But overall, if all you care about is image quality, all of these cameras are just genuinely amazing. You know, and they're all right there in that super cheap, similar price range from like 30 bucks to 60 bucks. So kind of just pick whichever one you want. But again, I personally would probably lean towards the D200, but if you feel like saving a few bucks, go ahead and get the D60, get the D40, get the D50. They're all really great cameras. Anyway, I think that's all I got for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.